The Good Place is an excellent TV series from NBC and hosted on Netflix. The first season was released in September of 2016, and the last episode was aired at the end of January just this year. It discusses a wide range of subjects, most obviously philosophy, ethics, and the afterlife. But when discussing it back in 2017 with my brother, I brought up another topic, which I had referred to as the Michael metaphor. I had assumed that this was somewhat well known, and even if this idea was a little obscure, my brother has a master's in screenwriting, so I thought he'd be sure to know what I was talking about. And it's the memory of his blank, questioning stare that has driven me to making this video. So today, I'm Barry by the way, I am going to lay out the Michael metaphor. This video is obviously going to spoil large chunks of The Good Place. But if you're watching this, I've got to assume you've seen the show already. I'm not here to tell you why you should watch it, just go watch it. So, watching The Good Place, we are introduced to the afterlife through the eyes of Eleanor Shellstrop. And the architect of this particular afterlife is this guy, Michael. He designed the entire world that this show is set in, at least initially, and he's responsible for making sure everyone has a good time. The parallels should be obvious, right? He created the world, he has a responsibility for everyone in it. And just in case you missed it, the show reminds you at the beginning of every single episode. Michael isn't just a character in The Good Place, he's the ultimate self-insert character. Let me explain. Often, when making a self-insert character, a writer simply adds in a character who talks exactly the way that they would talk, reacts the way they would react to things. It makes a character easier to write because it's just you. For a good writer, this makes them comparatively easy to flesh out and play with, whereas an easy writing pitfall is to make all the characters you ever write variants of yourself. But in The Good Place, Michael is different. He's not a self-insert because he mimics Michael Schur's personality, though he might, for all I know. Instead, Michael shares a writer's relationship with their characters. He sets up the world which they inhabit. He gives the characters goals and things to do, and he really just wants everyone to have a good time. Or at least, that's how he presents himself. Yes, you've all seen the show, you all know by now, Michael isn't on their side. Just as he set up every goal and reward for each of the characters, he's equally responsible for every obstacle, every pitfall placed in their way. It's his job, not only to maintain this world the characters inhabit, but to keep it interesting and difficult to challenge our characters. And now that I'm saying it, perhaps it sounds obvious, but that's exactly what a writer's job is. No one wants to watch a show about a group of people in heavenly bliss and everything is fine. Every story has an element of conflict, and despite writers often presenting themselves as being on the audience's side, in reality, they're the source of that conflict to begin with. This idea actually adds a sense of intentionality to other elements of the show. For example, in many situations, Michael's job is to give us exposition, explain the world to us, like a writer does. But Michael doesn't seem to care about it. The universe of The Good Place has a lot of rules that seem to be made up as and when they're needed. And they come up again repeatedly and in important ways. But they're delivered off the cuff. Michael and Janet don't care about these rules until they have some sort of relevance to the characters at the core of our story. They could detail specifically how the entire afterlife operates, but they don't care. It's not important to them. The characters are what matter. Oh yeah, Janet also fits into this metaphor. Michael might be the initial designer of the experience, but it was actually created by Janet. Janice, I think, to some extent, represents the production crew, the writing team, the actors, everyone it takes to put a show like this together. She represents the way the people working on a show bring their own ideas and values to a project. She points out the problems with Michael's ideas, keeps on top of the smaller details.
Not a girl.
And she gets surprisingly attached to one of the dumber characters, in a way no one would have predicted. And the longer she's on the show, the more irreplaceable she becomes, the more ingrained she is in the story and on these characters.
You're my friend.
And all of this goes even further. This can just be derived from Season 1. So far, this is a very surface level analysis of the difficulties of being a writer. The dichotomy of being on the audience's side, while also causing all the problems they run into. The show presents this as a betrayal of trust. You might conclude, if you saw the first season and nothing else, that the show is saying that all writers are lying demons preying on your emotions. And some are, but Season 2 starts to present us with a more nuanced position. The second season opens up with Michael realising there's no perfect scenario in which the characters just perpetually torture each other. In our analogy, this is equivalent to the idea that you can't just keep on telling a story forever, however hard the Simpsons might try. In a continuous story, change has to occur, and as long as the characters have any control, they'll try and change things to be better for themselves. At some point, the characters will either win out, even if only for a short time, or they'll come to the conclusion that nothing can be done and stop trying. Or worse yet, they'll realise they're in a story, controlled by someone else. So, when a writer realises that they can't just keep this story chugging along endlessly, it becomes their job not to make problems for our characters, but to find a satisfying endpoint. At this point, the problems are set up, and they still need to be overcome. And if you don't start working together with your characters, you'll never get there. Michael realises that all other options are closed to him, having tried every idea he could to maintain a status quo. But in the end, he has to team up with our characters. At some point, the writer has to say, okay, it might be difficult, but now we're going to end this. And to be clear, at this point, the writer doesn't actually have to know how to end the show. In The Good Place, Michael eventually reveals that he has no idea how to get to the real good place. In Season 3, he starts breaking rules not to end the story, but in a blind attempt just to work out why he hasn't been able to so far. The larger point was his decision to end it. I quite like this idea. Self-insert characters are usually made because they're easy to write. Fun, even. That can feed into this idea that the TV program you're writing can go on forever. Contrasting this with Michael taking on the writer's role, rather than their personality, makes him a clear representation of the fact that nothing can last forever. At first, I thought that this metaphor didn't really have a meaning, a moral. It's certainly not the central point of The Good Place. That can be found somewhere between life is about the meaning we give it, and there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. And this metaphor is a little irrelevant to that. But then I remembered. and this is going to sound really obvious, there are parts of the show where Michael is a protagonist, and parts where he's an antagonist.
That was a real trip for biscuits, and now we're all wet, Daddy-O.
See, I'd been thinking that this was just about the writer's relationship with their characters, which I do think holds up, but it also clearly tells us which writing style The Good Place is endorsing. Working with your characters, allowing their successes and failures to carry actual meaning, is the better way to write. Now, you might disagree. Maybe you loved all 10 seasons of Friends.
I feel like Friends in season 8. Out of ideas and forcing Joey and Rachel together even though it made no sense.
Maybe you're excited for season 32 of The Simpsons. But personally, the shows I've enjoyed most recently have been the ones with an end in sight, with clear character arcs and goals. I love shows like Breaking Bad, but when it dragged, it felt like it would never end. And when we watched the beginning of season 2 of The Good Place, I'm sure we all had the same thought. Is this what the show's gonna be now? Are they just gonna keep on resetting our characters forever? I hope you'll agree with me. The show was better for having ended.
Not sure I'm ready for that to end.
I know, buddy. It's hard when things end. But one way or the other, this is over. The only question is, what's next?